Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you all so much for coming. My name is Marge Baker. I'm Executive Vice President for Policy and Program at People for the American Way. And I'd like to welcome you to this summit on behalf of a growing constellation of organizations that are working around the country to overturn Citizens United through a constitutional amendment. I've said on other occasions that we're really in a movement moment. Americans everywhere are understanding the destruction that has been caused to our democracy by the Citizens United versus FEC case and related cases. From the halls of city councils and state legislators to the halls of the U.S. Congress, elected officials supported by energized constituents from around the country are mobilizing in support of amending the Constitution to overturn Citizens United and ensure that we the people means all the people and not just the powerful and the privileged. The senators and representatives who are joining us this morning are among those who have recognized this historic moment and introduced constitutional resolutions to overturn Citizens United in this Congress. They have differing language. There will be a healthy debate on exactly what an amendment should look like when we get to ratification. But right now, everyone is united in the principle, the core principle, that Citizens United has to be overturned through a constitutional amendment. What we need now is to build out the nationwide network of public officials who are expressing their support for overturning Citizens United through a constitutional amendment. And there's two primary ways to do that. One is to ask public officials to sign this Declaration for Democracy, a simple one-sentence declaration of support for overturning Citizens United through a constitutional amendment. And the second is to help promote the introduction and passage of local and state resolutions around the country. So far, 2 state legislatures and 150 localities have passed resolutions or initiatives supporting constitutional amendments to overturn Citizens United, and nearly 1,000 public officials are on record in support of constitutional remedies. So that we're here today to help build that movement, to help support the work that heroes around the country are doing to bring attention to the problem and to call for a constitutional amendment. With that, I'd like to turn this over to Senator Bernie Sanders, one of the leaders in the fight to overturn Citizens United with a constitutional amendment, who himself has introduced a constitutional resolution. Senator Sanders.
Thank you very much, Marge, and thank you all for being here, and thanks to People for the American Way, Public Citizen, and all the other organizations who are working so hard to help us overturn what I believe history will record as one of the worst Supreme Court decisions in the history of our nation. This country faces enormous problems. The middle class is declining, poverty is increasing. We're worried about global warming, we're worried about health care, we're worried about education. And the American people are looking to Washington and they say, what's going on? We have enormous problems and you're not addressing those problems. And I think what everybody in this room understands is that one of the reasons that Congress is not addressing those problems is the power of big money in terms of campaign contributions and in terms of lobbying. Working people are trying to keep their heads above water, and here on Capitol Hill, all kinds of money is flooding into this institution so that Congress spends day and night worrying about the wealthy and the powerful and forgetting about the middle class and working families. That's what we've had historically. And then 2 years ago, 5 people in the United States of America came to the conclusion that a corporation is a person. Unfortunately, those 5 people are on the United States Supreme Court. And what they said is that because a corporation is a person, that person is entitled to First Amendment rights. Therefore, corporations, Bank of America, Citigroup, ExxonMobil, just like you and me, they can go into their corporate treasuries and spend as much money as they want in campaigns to buy politicians and to buy elections. Well, let me tell you, in the state of Vermont and in America, we do not believe that that is what democracy looks like. And I, along with Congressman Ted Deutsch, have offered, as you know, a constitutional amendment. My good friend, Senator Tom Udall of New Mexico, has offered a constitutional amendment. They vary a little bit here. But ultimately, this is what we are fighting for. At the very deepest sense, we are fighting to make sure that America does not become an oligarchy where people with unlimited sums of money control the political process and the economic process. We are fighting for grassroots democracy, and we're going to win this fight because you're going to help us at the grassroots level, and most importantly, because the people of the United States understand that allowing big money interests to spend unlimited amounts of money on campaigns is not what people fought and died for to maintain this great country and our democracy. So with that, I want to introduce a colleague who has been very active in trying to curb the power of big money in the political process, Chuck Schumer of New York.
Well, thank you, Bernie. And I want to thank you for putting together this much-needed summit. I want to thank my colleagues, both Bernie Sanders and Tom Udall, for introducing constitutional amendments, and all of my House colleagues and so many others who were here. Now, I just want to say a few things here. I have been involved in this issue for decades. In the House, I introduced a constitutional amendment very similar to the one I'm co-sponsoring now with Tom Udall. Because even before Citizens United, I thought, nice to see you, Chairman, in the Judiciary Committee, on which I served under the leadership of John Conyers. He was not chairman then. Because I believe that Buckley v. Vallejo started us on this awful road where the average citizen just loses influence. And Buckley v. Vallejo was a decision that simply said that a multimillionaire had the right to put as much money as he or she wanted into his own campaign. And once that happens, the whole thing unravels. Because if you're going to put limits on people who can spend that money, then you're going to have to, if you're not going to have limits on millionaires, how do you limit everybody else? You'll just have a legislature and everybody else millionaires. And the point I'd make here, and that's why a constitutional amendment shouldn't be necessary, but is, there's a balance in every amendment. The First Amendment is not absolute. You can't falsely scream fire in a crowded theater. We have anti-pornography laws. We have libel laws. And what more important balance than to keep the wellspring of our democracy? Citizens United was an outgrowth of this. It is the worst decision since Plessy v. Ferguson. I believe that, of the United States Supreme Court. And just one fact. Something like 17 people have given half the Republican super PACs money, half their money. 17 people gave the Republican super PACs half their money. What is happening to America? This constitutional amendment is a moral, political, and substantive imperative. And frankly, if Thomas Jefferson or Alexander Hamilton, both sides of the equation, were looking down on this room, they'd say, go forward, right on, because our democracy is being ruined by these decisions. Thank you.
One of the leading voices in the Senate in opposition to Citizens United, and somebody who's brought forth an excellent constitutional amendment, Tom Udall of New Mexico. Tom.
Bernie, thank you very much. And I think the essence of what we see today in this audience is that what we really need is grassroots. And so I thank all of you, first of all, for traveling all across America here to lead this grassroots effort. And I first want to thank, I see State Representative Mimi Stewart from my state of New Mexico, who's right here. Mimi, wave to everybody. She has led the fight in our legislature for a memorial for calling for a constitutional amendment at the federal level, and we were successful this year, and I thank you for that. I know Bernie's state has done the same, town halls, the state legislature. So we have developing here a grassroots movement, and I think it's very, very important. And Bernie mentioned, and I think this is the key to this, all of the issues that you all love, that you care about, whether it's tax fairness or whether it's making sure that the middle class grows, all of those issues function around this issue. This is the core issue. All the things we believe in are not going to get done unless we face down the Supreme Court. They have taken this over. And what we're doing with this constitutional amendment is we're saying to them, no longer. You aren't in charge of this anymore. The state legislatures at the state level are going to deal with campaign finance reform, and at the federal level, the Congress is going to take it back. And so with that, we've got great colleagues here from the House, from the Senate. We want to unite with you to walk down this road, to take this back from the Supreme Court, and make sure that they know that they have issued one of the worst opinions in American history. James Madison said at one point and argued that the U.S. Constitution should only be amended when there is a great and extraordinary occasion. We are at that occasion today. Thank you.
I want to thank Tom and Chuck for being here from the Senate. Now we're going to hear from members of the House. Let me introduce a gentleman from the House who's been active on this issue for a long time, and I have worked with him on a constitutional amendment. He's doing a great job. Ted Deutsch of Florida.
Thanks. Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here today with so many people who are dedicated to returning our democracy to the American people by overturning Citizens United. Marge was right earlier when she said that this is a movement moment that we have here, and it is a pivotal moment indeed. Our campaign finance system's long been imperfect, but since Citizens United, the landscape has changed so dramatically, with super PACs like American Crossroads dumping nearly $40 million in defeating candidates. In 2010, we saw what happened. Now, for the first time, the American people are getting a taste of what Citizens United looks like nationally. Already in 2012, spending by non-campaign organizations is nearly 250% ahead of what it was in 2008. The Supreme Court's handed special interests a corporate megaphone capable of drowning out the interests of everyday Americans. Malicious attack ads are layering our TV airwaves and they're coming from these groups that claim they have nothing to do with the candidates. Well, when Americans go to the grocery store to buy food for their families, when they fill their car up with gas, when they buy medicine if they're sick, they don't expect that money that they pay to be used in a political campaign. Last November, I introduced a constitutional amendment to make clear that corporations aren't people, money is not a protected form of speech, and I'm proud to have worked with Senator Sanders on that. But Senator Udall has introduced a great amendment, and so many of my friends in the House have introduced really important constitutional amendments as well. The reality is we're a long way from ratifying the 28th Amendment to the Constitution. This amendment process is about a ground game. It's about Americans everywhere signing petitions and taking action and charting out a path to a more perfect union. It's about Resolutions Week, which is an incredible effort, an effort being undertaken by Public Citizen, Move to Amend, CWA and so many other groups, helping activists pass resolutions all across the country. It's about the Declaration for Democracy. And it's about a simple question of whether people across the country who are running for office stand with the American people or stand with the special interests. At the end of the day, I'm proud to be in the room with all of you, with people who understand how important this issue is, committed to the founding principle of our democracy, a government of the people and by the people and for the people. Ours cannot be, and this is I think the one thing that's most important that all of my colleagues understand, that ours cannot be the generation. We cannot be the generation that allowed our elections to be bought and sold by corporations and the super rich. That's what this whole process is about. That's why I'm so proud to be here with so many of my colleagues and so many activists from all around the country. And it is my great privilege and honor to introduce some of my colleagues. We'll see in a way of moving this along. I'd like to introduce Congresswoman Edwards, followed by Congressman Conyers, Congresswoman Sutton, Congressman Sarbanes, and Congressman Ellison, and then we'll see who else has fallen in. But it's a great honor and privilege for me to be here with so many good friends who are so committed to this important task. Thank you very much.
Thank you to my colleague, Congressman Deutsch, and also to our colleagues from the Senate. I'm Donna Edwards. I represent Maryland's 4th Congressional District. And I was just thinking as I was looking at this room of advocates from all around the country, I began my career 20 years ago at Public Citizen working on campaign finance reform. If only, and completely circumscribed by the Buckley v. Vallejo decision that Senator Schumer spoke about. We could not have imagined a world 20 years ago where today we're faced with a horrific decision by the United States Supreme Court in Citizens United that completely upends everything that we know about the people's role and the people's voice in our democracy. And we can't allow it to stand. 2 years ago when the Citizens United decision was announced, Chairman Conyers and I joined together in introducing a constitutional amendment 1 week after the decision. I think that we are a long way from that point here, but what we see is all across our the House and the Senate, a number of us coming together with various different ideas about how we need to amend the Constitution to respond to an environment in which corporate money, in which individual wealth is dominating our politics. It's only this election cycle that we're able to see the millions and millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars that will be spent in this election cycle that will upend our campaign finance system, upend our elections. And people are feeling increasingly at a distance from their participation in the process because the money has become so overwhelming. And so the question is not whether we should amend the Constitution. 72% of the American people, 78% of the American people in some polls agree that we should amend the Constitution to respond to this crisis. The question is whether we will have the leadership in the House of Representatives, in the United States Senate, to reflect the will of the American people to return elections back to people. And we can do that. And we can do it by the power of the advocacy that's demonstrated right here in this room. And so the fact that John Conyers and I have one constitutional amendment that some have signed on, that Ted Deutsch and Bernie Sanders and others have other ideas, is not a bad thing. In fact, it's a good thing, because I will be pleased and proud to join in signing a declaration for democracy that all of us can sign on to, with the idea that we need to debate this, get it out of the way, restore elections to the American people, return elections and the voice of the American people back into our elections process. And if there's anybody out there who's wondering why it is that people aren't participating in elections at the rates that they should be, why it is that people have a distance between themselves and their elected officials, you have no further to look than the damage that's been done by the Supreme Court in deciding Citizens United, that took all of the money out of our system and put it in the hands of a handful of people who are going to determine our elections. It's time that we take it back. Thank you very much.
I'm Congressman John Conyers, the former chair of the House Judiciary Committee, and I want to be chairman of this committee when these constitutional amendments come to the House of Representatives. We want to hear them. I don't care how many they are. I may join as a co-sponsor on all of them. But this is a signal moment, as has been said, in American history. And all of you, I can't be more proud of you. I want you to give the members of Congress that are here a round of applause for their courage and foresight in doing what they're doing. And finally, I want you to say with me, corporations are not peoples. Corporations are not people. One more time, corporations are not people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm Congresswoman Betty Sutton from Ohio. I want to say how proud I am to stand here with so many friends and colleagues from both the House and the Senate to say with one voice that the time is now to overturn Citizens United and return our democracy back to the American people. You know, our success as a democracy, our future as a country depends on the voice of the American people being heard and reflected in the policies that we enact. And it has to be the voices of working men and women across our country, a voice that protects good paying jobs right here in this country, a voice that stands up for seniors, and a voice that calls on everybody to create those opportunities for the American dream, not just for the privileged or the well-connected, but for everybody out there to have a chance to reach for all that is great about this country. And we know now with Citizens United that voice is being silenced. That voice is being drowned out by the voices of millionaires and billionaires and corporations that, quite frankly, when I pledge allegiance to the flag, I pledge allegiance to the United States of America. Multinational corporations do not do that. And that is a problem. It drowns out the voices of our firefighters and other workers out there. Silenced by an unfair Supreme Court ruling, it's taking our democracy and putting it squarely in the hands of big corporations and those with the deepest pockets. Well, we stand here today, united to take that voice back for the American people. We stand here today to say the time has come, as I said, to overturn Citizens United. And we stand here today. This is a movement. It's wonderful that we have all these tremendous, tremendous people in the House and the Senate who are committed to this cause, and our numbers are growing, and our commitment grows stronger every day. But this isn't about us. This is about us up here. It's about all of us in this room, and it's about all of the people behind all of the doors out there throughout this great nation. This is a movement, and this is ours to accomplish. The Republican leadership in the House, as my esteemed colleague Donna Edwards said, needs to heed the call of the American people everywhere and give us the opportunity to take our voice back. They need to allow a vote on our bills to overturn this horrible ruling and stop the corruptive process that so much money and so much of the amplification of the privileged voice that doesn't reflect the needs of the greater good of this country away and put it back into the hands of the American people. I think we're going to have now a wonderful leader, a man who is committed not just with words, but is showing by example the capacity that we have to take money out of politics. Representative John Sarbanes.
Thank you, Betty. I'll be brief. I'm actually one of the members of Congress who hasn't introduced a bill to amend the Constitution, but on behalf of all those who haven't, I want to thank my colleagues who have done so. And what that represents, frankly, was this impulse to respond to the Citizens United case. If you look across the country, and we feel it when we talk to our constituents, the air is thick with cynicism about the influence of big money in politics. And there's three ways to push back on that. amending the Constitution to effectively repeal the Citizens United case, encouraging more transparency and disclosure so we know where the money comes from, and building a public financing system that can take this back from the special interests. And we're working in the House and the Senate, and all the advocates here join together on those three efforts. So I want to thank, again, my colleagues. I want to thank all the people at the state level who are making a difference in terms of rallying and marshaling this energy that exists there to push back on Citizens United. We're fortunate to have from our state Jamie Raskin, who's a state legislator in Maryland, who collected 107 signatures out of 188 in the Maryland General Assembly calling on Congress to pass this constitutional amendment. I don't want to see the day, and it's coming soon, where billionaires, instead of owning sports teams, own candidates. I don't want to see the day when we're walking on the floor of the House with corporate logo on us like NASCAR drivers because, you know, some big corporation has decided that they own the candidates on the floor of the House. We can push back on this. We're going to do it with your help and with the support of all of these great leaders here in Congress. One of them who's worked hardest on this and has been a voice for progressive values since he came to Congress is my colleague, Keith Ellison.
You know, you all would be very proud to know that 2 states have already passed measures saying that Citizens United must go. 172 municipalities have passed declarations or resolutions saying down with Citizens United, up with people's voice. And over 1,000, as a matter of fact, somebody gave me a list, 1,000 elected public officials, from members of Congress to municipal leaders, city councils, county officials, school board members have said, let's get rid of this bad decision. And I think Donna said 78% of the American people, so that's millions of Americans say this thing has got to change. Folks, we got a movement right here. We're on the move, and we need everyone, particularly elected officials and not, to sign up on this declaration, sign the Declaration for Democracy, which says very simply, the Declaration for Democracy, post it up there. I, say your name, declare my support for amending the Constitution of the United States to restore the rights of the American people, undermined by Citizens United and related cases, to protect the integrity of our elections and limit the corrosive influence of money in our democratic process. With this vehicle, we are going to organize America, and all Americans are essential to that success. We need people to take personal responsibility to get your mama signed up, your kids, everybody, right? Your sewing group, your bowling group. This has got to be mass action, and everybody has an essential role to play. And I just want to say, as I wrap up, you know, just this morning, the Progressive Caucus declared that we would put in here, Progressive Caucus, signed onto this declaration. So our caucus has done that. And we also, that's worth a hand. And we also pledged that our members would support and engage Resolution Week coming up on June 11th, in which we'll have resolutions passed all over this country by municipalities. And when municipalities pass these sort of declarations and resolutions, local news picks it up. And when local news picks it up, regular citizens in the barbershops, the hair shops, and the bowling alleys get the news. And it gets to be an issue that everybody is talking about. So let me tell you, we are in a moment that, you know what, people pray to be in. We get to reclaim our nation and move our country forward. Sometimes somebody might hit you in the chin, like the Citizens United case, but you know the real fighters, they step back up and swing even harder. We are fueled by the challenge of this, are we not? So let me just say, between now and when we pass this thing, we also, and it will help fuel our movement, to be able to say that we are making the information of these super PACs public. So I personally believe we should also support Representative Van Hollen's Disclose Act, which requires public reporting of all campaign activity. But I tell you, this is a great movement to be part of. And I just want to say that we are moving forward, and it's exciting and a very exciting moment. And I can't wait to sign my name on that declaration, and I can't wait for you to do the same thing. Get online, organize, and I think we have a few more members who are here to make a few comments. But I want to let you know that we have a great collection of members of Congress here. Peter Welch, Dave Cicilline, Hank Johnson. We got a whole bunch of them, actually. But so they'll be coming up. I don't know which order.
Let's please, Congressman, come on up.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna ask folks to indulge us with a very, very brief statement of support so that we can get through our whole agenda. Thank you so much.
I'd be
for being
brief.
here.
30 years ago, the top 1% in this country owned 8.5% of the wealth. Today, they own 25% of the wealth. And loopy billionaires who've done very well are now going to own the political process. And what this is about is whether the middle class and folks struggling to get into the middle class are going to have any chance to use people power at the ballot box to have their issues concerned. So this is really important work that you're doing. We are shoulder to shoulder with you. Thanks for all that you're getting done.
I'm David Cicilline from the state of Rhode Island. I just want to join my colleagues and say how important this effort is. I'm brand new to Congress. Our democracy is in grave peril, and it's in peril because of the influence of special interest money that is corrupting the development of public policy in this country. Thank you for the work that you're going to do with us to make sure we fix this for the sake of our country. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. I think you represent a burgeoning movement that is going to be successful in taking our country back. It should be a government of, by, and for the people, not one that is of, by, and for the corporate interests. And that is what we have today. Citizens United was a landmark ruling in that it opened the door for corporate money to run unbridled through the legislative garden, trampling on all of our rights as spring plants, shooting up out of the ground and trying to roll over us and pave us, and so that we can't grow. And so we must stop this movement. Citizens United is not to be taken as a solo issue. It's part of a network that we need to fully investigate and expose to the people, and so that the people can see what is actually going on in America. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I'm Rush Holt. I represent the people of Central New Jersey, and like my friend John Sarbanes, I'm not an author of one of these constitutional amendments, but they're all on the right track. Because, you know, I carry a copy of the Constitution with me all the time, not because I don't know what's in it, but I do like to keep it close to my heart. And, you know, it clearly began with the words, we the people, not we the corporations. It is rarely amended. It should be rare to have an amendment to it. But we've got to make sure that it is consistent with the spirit that gave us our country. And that's why it is necessary to do this. While you are working on the constitutional amendment, we should forthwith pass the Disclose Act, bring transparency into the process, get funding, federal funding of campaigns, and make sure that any corporation's actions are transparent and subject to the will of the shareholders. All of those things must be done while we work on the constitutional amendment. I have signed this declaration. You should see that all of your friends and neighbors, we're going to take this back to our constituencies, make sure that they sign on to this. Thank you.
We've been joined by Jim McGovern, who is in full support.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I'm sorry I'm late. I just came from a market where they're trying to cut $33 billion in food stamp money, so that's a good reason to be late. But anyway, I want to thank all the other members who have spoken already and for their commitment to this issue. Look, Citizens United marked the most extreme example of the so-called personhood movement, where corporations assert fabricated rights under the Constitution to strike down public interest laws protecting the environment, healthcare, consumer rights, and civil rights, and elections. Corporations are not people. They do not breathe. They do not have children. They do not die in war. They are artificial entities which we, the people, create, and as such, we govern them, not the other way around. I've introduced the People's Rights Amendment, which is very simple and straightforward. It would make clear that all corporate entities, for-profit and non-profit alike, are not people with constitutional rights. It treats all corporations, including incorporated unions and nonprofits, in the same way, as artificial creatures of the state that we, the people, govern, not the other way around. And let me just be clear, the People's Rights Amendment preserves all the individual rights guaranteed under the Constitution. Individual members of corporations, they have free speech and constitutional rights like everyone else. But look, we are at a crossroads in our country where either we stand up and do the right thing, or we're going to lose our rights, and corporations are going to be calling all the shots and not the people. So I'm really proud to be here with all my colleagues. Thank you.
So now let me invite colleagues to join us and answer a few questions, and then we'll conclude the.
Before we do,
we got more.
Before we answer questions, let's have, because I know some people have to leave. Let's have our colleagues, starting with Donna Edwards, who filed the First Amendment almost immediately after the Citizens United decision. Sign the declaration, and then we'll take.
And if I could just add, we're joined by local and state officials who have been instrumental in passing local resolutions. So we're going to ask them to join in signing this Declaration for Democracy. And anyone can find this declaration at www.united4thepeople.org. www.united4thepeople.org. Pull it off and go have your local representative, your state representative sign.
Do we have names of city officials? Yeah. All right. So let's sign it. Well,
Probably take questions always.
Yeah, I think we should. I think we should do. We can walk and chew gum. Right here. Colleagues want to jump in? Under the Constitution, what kind of speech, political speech, can the government control? So that's the question.
Here's the thing. I mean, in Citizens United, what the court said is that Congress has no authority to regulate this kind of political speech. And so all these constitutional amendments go to this question of giving Congress the authority that the Supreme Court, I think, wrongly decided isn't within Congress's our constitutional purview. And so, the traditional rights of free speech that we have known as citizens would not be disturbed by any of these constitutional amendments. But what it would do is it would say all of the speech in which, whether it's corporations or campaign committees and others engage in, would be able to be fully regulated under the authority of the Congress and under our Constitution. It would recognize that, and it would recognize in some of the constitutional amendments, and I think we have to debate them, it would recognize that individuals have rights of speech, but as others have said, Congressman McGovern has said, corporations, however they're constituted, are not individual creatures. They are not persons. And I think that the point here is that we have a lot of variations on the idea of a constitutional amendment. The question is whether we will be able to get to the table of a debate in committee so that we can actually move something that we develop broad consensus on about the relative role and responsibility of the Congress with respect to governing the way campaigns are conducted.
Hang on.
What do you mean by corporations for law term? I mean, it could be General Electric, or it could be like 4 people.
It's not Donna Edwards. I mean, a corporation is not, I mean, in my view, and a corporation is not a person. It is not an individual. The rights that it has are those that are granted by the state, granted by the Congress. And we need to make sure that the Supreme Court, look, courts make decisions all the time. It's the job of the United States Congress and the people of the United States to make sure that when we believe they've gotten it wrong in terms of their interpretation of the Constitution, that we make sure that our Constitution reflects fully what we believe. And as I said, 78% of the American people believe, as we do, that Citizens United was wrongly decided and that Congress should have the authority to regulate campaigns.
Okay, let me just say that we are joined here today, and we're all very proud to have with us City Councilor David Marshall from Portland, Maine. Mr. Marshall, just want to say greet you right now. And then also want to say very proud to have New Mexico State Rep Mimi Stewart, who's here. Mimi, thank you very much. And then we also have Maryland State Senator Jamie Raskin, who's right there, and very proud of them. So let's have some of our local officials help join answer these questions as well. More hands. As I recognize you, say your name and what news source you're from, please. You, sir.
I'm Andrew Joseph with National Journal. I'm wondering, Citizens United, there's been a lot of talk about corporate money going to super PACs, but if you look at it, that's not really the case. Most of it's coming from individuals who, and they have other, even without Citizens United, they've had ways to donate to political candidates in sort of large amounts before. So I guess it hasn't really led to the outgrowth of the corporate spending that people warned about. So I'm curious to know what your response is to that.
Anybody want to jump into this?
I'd make two quick points. First of all, we need a constitutional amendment in order to give Congress the ability to regulate both the corporate dollars and to prevent the elections from being overtaken by the super wealthy. But the fact that corporations have not fully engaged and fully funded super PACs in April does not mean that as we go forward between now and the election that we should have any illusions about their involvement. The other point I make is we do know that there are corporations who have made very significant contributions to 501c4s. There's no disclosure requirement there. The 501c4s can then turn around and funnel money to these super PACs. So the statistics that you've given, I'm not sure are entirely accurate given what we know about money that's coming into the system that winds up being used by these super PACs.
Okay, we have one more question, and then I'll call up Mr. Diallo Brooks to moderate the rest of the proceedings today. One more question I could take? Young lady at the end. You might want to stand up and speak loud. Ted, you want to jump in?
Yeah, we have different. That's going to be part of the debate as this goes forward. The one thing that I think everyone agrees on is that for-profit corporations, we've all touched on this, that are created by law and created by individuals were never meant to have the same constitutional protections that were given to individuals. Beyond that, how unions are treated and how nonprofits are treated, that'll be part of the debate. Ultimately, though, Congress needs the authority to enact meaningful campaign finance reform, and that's only going to come if we amend the Constitution to overturn Citizens United.
So let's conclude here. The fact is that, look, money is not speech, corporations are not people, and democracy should never be for sale in America. With that, let me ask Diallo Brooks to come forward. Diallo Brooks is from People for the American Way. You got it.
How's everybody doing? You still hanging in with us? All right, great. I actually get the privilege to introduce to you folks that are doing this work on the more grassroots level, on the state and local level, from city council to state legislatures to actual activists that are working on the ground to move these constitutional amendment resolutions and also to call on Congress to do what we're doing here today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce all of you all at one time, and you can come up individually, tell your story. We have 2 minutes to do so. Just want to remind you of that in order to keep time moving. First, we'll have City Councilor David Marshall. who is from Portland, Maine. He'll be discussing the resolution that was passed and worked on the city council level. We also have New Mexico State Representative Mimi Stewart, who I've had the privilege of working with for many years and is a great local state representative, who will be discussing the work that's happening in New Mexico. We also have Vermont activist Georgina Forbes from Vermont. Oh, there she is. Where'd you go? She'll be talking about the work that she did in Vermont, which is very, very significant from the activist perspective on this issue. And also, last but not least, we have Maryland State Senator Jamie Raskin, who has been doing a tremendous amount of work in Maryland around this as well. So each of them will be telling their stories and telling why this movement is important to happen on the grassroots level, at the state and local level, in order to help provide kind of the legs behind what Congress is doing, a lot of the congressional folks that we've heard from earlier. All right, thank you. And we'll start with
Hello, I'm David Marshall. I'm a city councilor in Portland, Maine, and it's my great honor to be here today in support of the congressional leaders who have come here in order to tackle one of the greatest challenges that's facing our country, possibly throughout our entire history. It's this huge effort in order to overturn Citizens United versus the Federal Elections Commission, and I really want to thank sincerely the senators and the congressmen and women who came here today in support of this, because it's these leaders that will make the big difference. It was the enthusiasm of my constituents that inspired me as an elected city councilor to sponsor a resolution urging Congress to amend the Constitution to end corporate personhood and to overturn Citizens United. Members of the Green Party, the League of Young Voters, and Occupy Maine all reached out to me for sponsorship. With Americans across the country protesting the disparity of wealth between the rich and the poor, my constituents said that we must address the root of the problem. We must address the damaging influence that money has on our government through campaign donations. The decision of the Supreme Court in the case of Citizens United has resulted in unlimited spending and influence in elections. Some elected officials feel compelled to enact policies to benefit corporations and wealthy donors instead of the people that elected them to the position in the first place. This is an effort to ensure one's own success in a re-election by being able to raise huge amounts of money. With super PACs spending millions of dollars on campaigns during the presidential election, the decision of Citizens United has turned our electoral process into an auction. The use of private money to influence public elections is the antithesis of Maine's traditional political values of independence, equality, and civil engagement. In fact, the state of Maine was the first state in the country to enact a successful clean election system in 1996. And on January the 18th of this year, the Portland City Council held a public hearing in a packed council chambers where dozens of citizens stood up and demanded that Congress take action. This is a grassroots movement from the bottom. People from all walks of life want Congress to act, and they want Congress to act now. We're at a great turning point in our history. It is time for our congressional leaders to join millions of citizens across the nation. It's time for us to rise up. It's time for us to return our democracy to we the people. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm State Representative Mimi Stewart from the great state of New Mexico. That's the state that's between Texas and Arizona. The land of enchantment. I'm very proud to be a state rep from New Mexico. A year ago in 2011, I tried to pass a congressional resolution to asked Congress to overturn Citizens United. That lost in the House by 2 votes. But 2012, a year later, we passed the congressional resolution in the House, won by 10 votes, and in the Senate, it won by another 10, I think. So, yes. We like to say we're the first state in, wait for it, the continental U.S. to pass the resolution out of both houses. So what was the difference between last year and this year? Well, there's good news. You've heard it from people up here. The public is starting to get it. The public is behind it. And those folks that haven't heard of it, you give them 2 or 3 sentences and they're as outraged as the rest of us. The bad news is that legislative bodies tend to not really like anti-corporate initiatives. State legislatures are a little different from Congress, but they suffer from the same problem, the corporate influence of money. So the challenge really was to engage the public, civic engagement, and communications to those legislators that voted against it, that thought they could take care of their corporate folks. We did that with Free Speech for People. Free Speech for People came in. They helped organize our Center for Civic Policy, Common Cause, League of Women Voters, the trial lawyers. We were all together. We contacted the media. We tried to get our message out and connect the dots for people so that they would understand the real issue with corporate money and what it does. So because of that, the real secret was phone banking, calling into legislators that would otherwise not vote for this to get them to understand that their constituents really wanted this. So that organizing is what you all are best at. That's what we need to do. And the good news, again, is that if we get an amendment to the Constitution in New Mexico, we're going to pass it like that. And it will happen in all of your states. So onward and forward and get Congress to send us that amendment. Thank you.
I'm Georgina Forrest from... Before you speak, can I just say, Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, and I'm signing. Thanks. And I'm on the bill. I'm on the bill. Progressive Caucus, I'm sorry. Yes. Great. I'm Georgina Forrest from Vermont, and I wanted to thank Bernie Sanders and all of the senators and representatives who've been here today, who we depend on to lead this movement to pass a constitutional amendment. And thanks to all of you representing organizations and states across the country committed to raising the millions of voices needed to make this happen. I'm grateful for this opportunity to represent 70 towns in Vermont that voted in March at town meeting in favor of a constitutional amendment to reverse the damage done by Citizens United. In my town of Norwich, and in 69 other towns, hundreds of people like me stood at the dump, outside the post office, in front of the general store, and spoke with our neighbors and gathered names on petitions to get this article on the ballot. Republicans and Democrats alike thanked us for doing this. We spoke at town meeting and we voted asking our state legislature to vote with us in support of a constitutional amendment. Just last week, our state Senate voted 26-3 in favor of an amendment. Thousands of Vermonters participated in this effort. I would say a Vermont Public Interest Research Group, some of them belong to, and Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, the Burlington Peace and Justice Center, and also some more recent people from the Occupy movement, which is very much alive and well all over Vermont. As we speak, we are fighting in Vermont for our state's rights to be respected in the face of a huge corporation, Entergy, which intends to trump the majority vote of the citizens of Vermont and the will of our duly elected legislature, governor, and even our attorney general by refusing to decommission the Vermont Yankee nuclear power plant on schedule and according to contract. We really need to find a way to put corporations in their proper place in our society and safeguard the rights of ordinary citizens. More important, I think, we need to all understand that we must talk with our neighbors and enlist them in the dialogue. and we need, most important, on a larger scale, is we need to wake the sleeping giant that is the people of the United States. If democracy is the ship of state, then it will go down like the Titanic in the face of corporate personhood, and the iceberg of corporate personhood and wealth will flood our elections, and it will buy our leadership and drown our freedom. We, the people, still have rights, and we need to use them or lose them.
Hello, my name is Jamie Raskin. I'm a state senator in Maryland. Greetings to fellow natural persons out there. We're delighted about the leadership we've gotten from our delegation, Congressman Sarbanes and Congresswoman Edwards, on this issue. In Washington, I bring good news from Annapolis, which is we just passed a constitutional amendment. A century later, we passed the 17th Amendment to the Constitution. Because when I started working on this, I went back and looked at what our history was with constitutional amendments. It turned out there was one we hadn't passed, which was the one which gave direct election of U.S. senators to the people of the United States, because we weren't in session in 1913 when this went out. So I introduced it, and people were kind of curious. Will this have any practical effect? And I said, well, it's interesting because this will be the segue to the constitutional amendment to repeal Citizens United, because the 17th Amendment was all about liberating the state legislatures from the tyranny of corporate money, which was buying U.S. senators. They called them corporation senators at the time. And the solution that the populists and the progressives and William Jennings Bryan came up with was to shift the mode of election from the state legislatures to the people. And so the Tea Party's actually against the 17th Amendment. They want to repeal it. So there were 2 votes against this in the Maryland legislature. But we passed the 17th Amendment overwhelmingly. And also, I bring you more good news, which is we don't do policy resolutions. So we don't just take positions on things. So I wrote a letter with my colleague, Delegate Sheila Hickson, to the members of Congress, calling on them to pass a constitutional amendment to repeal Citizens United and to restore democratic sovereignty to the people in the state legislatures, which, after all, created the corporations in the first place. And we have a majority of the Maryland House and a majority of the Maryland Senate which have signed this letter, which I've brought here today to be part of these proceedings. And I just want to say about that, there's an important federalism component to this, because the corporations are the creatures of the state. That goes back to Chief Justice John Marshall in the Dartmouth College case. And yet the Supreme Court has done precisely what Justice White warned everybody about in First National Bank of Boston versus Bellotti. He said the state need not permit its own creation to consume and devour it. And yet that's precisely what the Supreme Court did in the Citizens United decision. The creatures of the state suddenly have been emancipated and set loose, so they roam the land and they're beginning to devour our politics. And now is the time that we've got to turn it around. If you look at the history of constitutional movements, they create all kinds of interesting politics. And I'm psyched that there are people like Congressman Sarbanes who are using this as an opportunity to introduce other kinds of legislation to deal with this problem. And one other thing I'd love to put on the table is this idea. When people defend Citizens United, they always say, well, it's not just corporations, it's unions too that have been given the right to take money out of the Treasury and to spend in campaigns. Well, there's another line of authority then I would direct your attention to, which begins with the Beck case and the Abood case. And those decisions said that dissenting union members have a right to a rebate from the union treasury if they disagree with the speech that the unions are engaged in. Shouldn't we have that rule for corporations too? If you're a shareholder and you disagree with the spending of your corporation on a political campaign, shouldn't you have a right to your proportionate share of corporate resources in a rebate, just like the union members have under a clear line of Supreme Court precedent? So we've really got to begin to turn the whole question around and demand that corporations be put back into their rightful place. It is we the people, it's not we the corporations, and we're not going to lie down and let these corporations roll all over us. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. This is the next part of the program. I'm Robert Weissman, the president of Public Citizen. Really thrilled that you're all here. We're really deeply appreciative of the support and leadership of the elected officials, so many that we've heard from today. We've made achievements in this movement for a constitutional amendment that were unimaginable 2 years ago, 1 year ago, even 6 months ago. And I think all that's happening in Congress, and even the president now supporting a constitutional amendment, is reflective of what's happening on the ground, that the movement is growing so fast, accelerating so much, that the elected officials want to make sure that they are leading the people before the people are leading them too much. So we're going to hear now from a whole range of people. We can't possibly get all the organizations who are working on this represented today, but we've got a big bunch. Because it's such a big bunch and because they are so precise in their words, they will manage their time excellently and not spend more than a minute or so. A big coalition of folks working on this can be listed at the site that Marge was referencing, unitedforpeople.org. You can see many more organizations. I want to especially mention US PIRG and Demos and Bullfrog Films, who are working really hard on trying to drive a big organizing effort that's been referenced in June around Resolutions Week, getting more local state resolutions going. You can get more information about that at resolutionsweek.org. Here's who we're going to hear from. They'll come up in the following order. Marge Baker from People for the American Way, Joan Stallard from the Coalition on Corporate Power DC, which is a Washington affiliate of Move to Amend. She'll be followed by Shane Larson, the Legislative Director of the Communication Workers of America. Then Rudy Arredondo, the president of the National Latino Farmers and Ranchers Trade Association, was also a board member of American Sustainable Business Council. Rudy will be followed by John Bonifaz, the founder and executive director of Free Speech for People. After John will be Derek Cressman from Common Cause. And rounding out this very precise and excellent but pointed set of presentations will be the wonderful Lisa Graves from the Center for Media and Democracy. So Marge, you will lead us off.
Okay. Thank you, Robin. I'll just take 30 seconds to remind folks what People for the American Way is going to be spending a fair amount of time doing is encouraging our activists and the activists of ally organizations to use this Declaration for Democracy, to put it in your hands, take it to have local activists take it to their elected officials, elected and appointed officials, and ask them to sign the basic principle that says they declare their support for democracy. So you can go to www.unitedfor4thepeople.org. The declaration is right on the site. You can download it, take it to your public officials, and help join this effort. So thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Joan Stallard from Move to Amend, affiliated here in DC, and I represent affiliates all over this country. They are forming as we speak, and they have signed on to Move to Amend strictly on the principle that corporations are not people and money is not speech. And our purpose is to form an organization that will stay put and work on corporate power after we overturn Citizens United and after we get the amendment to overturn corporate personhood, because the job is that big. We have to form. So we're pursuing these resolutions and these ballot initiatives, but we are forming names, addresses, zip codes. I mean, we are going to stay organized. And some affiliates are meeting in rooms with 1,500 people. And some of them are meeting in homes still because they're only a month old. And I do want to impress upon you that nobody is going anywhere until we feel that the power is back in the hands of the people where it belongs, and not with the corporations and not with the huge billionaires who are maximizing their profits and not paying taxes in many cases. And as huge as the Citizens United blow was to us, it was a big favor that we think it did to us because all of a sudden the people of the United States understood the issue. And their eyes popped open after the ruling came down and said, "What? Are you kidding me?" And here it was, 1886, when the concept of corporate personhood first entered into the Supreme Court rulings. It was sort of sneaked in unofficially and illegally, but it became precedent 5 years later as the corporations gradually worked their power. And this has to stop, and we hope that you will, in one way or another, work with a coalition, form, and organize, and this is the message. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Shane Larson, and I'm with the Communication Workers of America. I really want to thank all the leaders here, both all the elected officials and the citizen groups that have come together to help lead the fight to overturn Citizens United. The Communication Workers of America will stand and fight with everyone to overturn the Citizens United decision. This is a critical issue for CWA as we've come to the fundamental realization that our democracy and our democratic system is broken today. In 2008, we thought we had the chance to take meaningful action on the issues that were very important to our members. Healthcare reform that lowered costs and provided high-quality care with a public option. Retirement security, sound retirement security. Good, stable jobs, and an expansion of collective bargaining and organizing rights. Our lack of progress on those issues when our allies at the White House, the House, and almost 60 votes in the United States Senate was disappointing and sobering to us. And that was before the Citizens United decision. CWA is proud to be taking a lead within the labor movement to reorientate the way that we are fighting for change, and we're proud to stand with our brothers and sisters in organized labor from the AFL-CIO, SEIU, NEA, AFT, and various other labor organizations that have taken up this fight, because we realize that we cannot make meaningful progress on the issues important to our members until we tackle the stranglehold that corporate money has on our democracy. That before we can tackle any of these meaningful policy changes, we need to be engaged and come together with all these other groups and elected officials to, as Marge said at the very beginning, a movement to take this country back in our political system for the people. Part of that is the corporate agenda to manipulate and the suppression of voters in the electorate, and the broken Senate rules are just part of that. And we aren't under any illusions that this is going to be easy. It's a multi-year fight for change, but we are working on educating our members and all of the members in the labor movement and citizens in congressional districts across the country, taking the fight to those members of Congress that have become beholden to their corporate funders rather than the interests of the working families in their districts. So we're actually very excited, looking forward to this fight and working with everyone here to help return this country to our founding fundamental principles of we the people, not they the corporations.
Good morning. I thank everybody, and certainly the Congress people and my delegation from the state of Maryland that came here. I'm Rudy Arredondo with the National Latino Farmers and Ranchers Trade Association. We have suffered the consequences of the concentration of agribusiness in the field of agriculture. And we are initiating an 11 state organizing campaign, of which this is going to be a part of our agenda, and to ensure that we have become indentured servants to the agribusiness folks. We cannot have that. And we are working on the 2012 Farm Bill, and we are taking that case along to different places to ensure that we have sustainable communities and that we feed all of you, because everybody's in agriculture, everybody eats. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Bonifaz. I'm the co-founder and director of Free Speech for People. I'm honored to be here with all of you today on this critical question of our time. Free Speech for People is a national campaign launched on the day of the Citizens United ruling to press for a 28th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution to make clear that corporations are not people with constitutional rights. We worked closely with Congressman Jim McGovern in the introduction of the People's Rights Amendment, House Joint Resolution 88, which you can get a copy of at the back. We've been engaged in a four-pronged strategy for the past 2 years, helping to build this movement across the political spectrum. First, we have worked with many other groups here and elsewhere around the country in pushing state and local resolutions calling for a constitutional amendment. And State Representative Mimi Stewart of New Mexico referenced this with respect to the work that we did with her and others on the ground in New Mexico in that successful campaign. And we are helping to lead a similar campaign in Massachusetts, and we're partnering with Common Cause to place the first statewide ballot initiative on this question on the Montana ballot this November. Second, we are pushing back in the courts against the corporate rights doctrine. We filed an amicus brief before the Montana Supreme Court in defense of Montana's century-old law barring corporate money in elections. In late December, the Montana Supreme Court, as some of you may know, issued a major ruling upholding the law and setting up the first test case to challenge the Citizens United ruling. We will be filing an amicus brief in the coming days before the U.S. Supreme Court to urge it to take this case on its merits and to reverse Citizens United. Third, in partnership with the American Sustainable Business Council, we are mobilizing support from business leaders around the country in support of a constitutional amendment. And we have enlisted more than 1,000 business leaders to date in that call. This is not an anti-corporate and anti-business campaign. This is a pro-American campaign, and business leaders understand that, who are going to be squashed by the multinational corporations. So small business leaders are part of this movement as well. In addition, we have launched with ASBC and the Ben & Jerry's ice cream company the Get the Dough Out of Politics campaign at getthedoughtout.org to build further support for this movement. Finally, we are building key support in the legal community for a constitutional amendment, and we have recently helped to catalyze a letter issued to Congress by 11 state attorneys general calling for amendment. We are proud to be working with Congressman McGovern, other members of Congress, the other groups represented here, and millions of people all across this country who are dedicated to reclaiming our democracy. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Derek Cressman with Common Cause. I'm going to limit my speech since time is brief and I want to enhance the voice of others, but I want to first recognize how far this movement has come. In the late 1990s, I was the sole advocate for the sole organization supporting the Hollings-Specter constitutional amendment to overturn Buckley versus Vallejo. And back then, we could not even imagine the people in this room. This room wasn't even built, let alone the movement that is out there in the country. So we are building towards a tipping point, and it is very exciting for me to see. Now, the Constitution exists as a piece of paper in the National Archives. It exists as a series of court rulings, but most importantly, it exists in the hearts and minds of Americans. So Common Cause's Amend 2012 campaign is going to take this issue and put it directly in front of voters all across this country this coming November. John mentioned our effort in Montana, where we've partnered with Free Speech for People. We're working with COPERG and other groups to do a similar measure in Colorado. One's cooking in Massachusetts. A measure's already been referred in Richmond, California, and just Monday, 11,000 signatures were turned in, mostly by Move to Amend volunteers in Salt Lake City. Voters are going to use a historical precedent that was used in drafting the Constitution, in passing the Bill of Rights, to instruct their elected officials to take back our country and reverse the Supreme Court. Thank you.
My name is Lisa Graves, and I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Media and Democracy, and we're the publisher of PR Watch and ALEC Exposed. We are working to expose corporate influence both by corporations and CEOs on our democracy in a host of ways. And so we're pleased to be here to help support the tremendous efforts of the members of Congress to really raise awareness about this issue, and the tremendous efforts of grassroots groups across the country who are really working to educate their fellow citizens about what's at stake. For our part, what we're trying to do is help tell the story not just of the super PACs that are the direct lineage of Buckley to Citizens United to Speech Now versus FEC, which has basically suggested that this Congress has no power to regulate the spending of money to influence elections. We think that's wrong, and we're working to help document that. We're also focusing not just on the super PACs, but also telling the story about how C6 trade organizations like American Petroleum Institute and others are getting corporate money in to help influence elections, are running ads, and all these other groups between the C3, C4, C5, C6s, in essence, not to get too detailed here, but with the super PACs, all the ways money is coming in to influence and corrupt our democracy. And so we're here to provide support and research support to all of our friends and allies.
So thanks to everybody who's participated in this. Thank you all for joining us today. This is a historic thing that we are undertaking, and we are going to succeed in it. You know, the American people we may have many foibles and faults, but we're pretty good on common sense. And the American people do not believe that corporations are people. I think it's laughable. That's why Stephen Colbert is so funny. American people do not believe that spending is a form of speech. The American people do not believe that Karl Rove should be empowered to launder $250 million in corporate and super rich money to influence election outcomes. The American people don't think our election should be bought by the Chamber of Commerce, spending a comparable amount of money to influence election outcomes. They don't think that an individual billionaire casino magnate should be able to keep in business the candidacy of a candidate who otherwise has no chance. They don't think that a handful of hedge fund millionaires ought to be able to fund the leading Republican presidential nominee to run endless negative attack ads to dominate the electoral process. They don't think that our election should be characterized by attack ad after attack ad after attack ad run by unaccountable organizations with meaningless names, with anonymous donors who don't care at all what anybody thinks about them. People have common sense. They don't think any of this is right. And the only cure for this in the post-Citizens United world, and to deal with a whole bunch of other decisions, is a constitutional amendment. Now, the only argument, serious argument against, in my view, against the constitutional amendment is the feasibility, right? That's a hard thing to do, and we've all acknowledged this is going to be a long time coming. But I don't think it's going to be as long time maybe coming as perhaps people have been suggesting. The momentum that we're gathering is really growing fast. We've got a quarter of the United States Senate supporting a constitutional amendment. We've got the President of the United States supporting a constitutional amendment. We've got the Progressive Caucus supporting a constitutional amendment. I'm sure by the end of this year, we're going to have more than 150 members of the U.S. House of Representatives signed on to this declaration. So the idea today was to take stock of what we've done and energize us to go forward, highlight these two major important initiatives going on, as well as all that's been achieved so far, this Declaration for Democracy, the resolutionsweek.org initiative that's moving forward. Together we are going to make this thing happen. Go forth and organize. All right.